This is a short presentation about argument, hoping to get beyond mere contention to understand some structures and metaphors. So here are some things that we think argument is.
For 2 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
On a doomsday scale of 0 to 10, 0 meaning zero doom, 10 meaning absolute metaphysical doom, a total wipeout, annihilation, nothing remaining. How much doom does Hillary face in the November election?
Pejorative term.
Even Democrats don't use it. They use
progressive.
progressive.
All you want.
Liberal
all you want. You won't worry.
Or is it something like this?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to have an argument, please.
Certainly, sir. Have you been here before?
No, this is my first time.
I see. Do you want to have the full argument, or were you thinking of taking a course?
Well, what would be... For a good argument.
No, you didn't. You came here for an argument.
Well, an argument's not the same as contradiction.
Can be.
No, it can't. An argument's a collective series of statements to establish a definite proposition.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. It isn't just contradiction.
Look, if I argue with you, I must take up a contrary position.
But it isn't just saying no, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't.
So is there something better than talking over each other or just contradicting each other? Bruce Ballinger said, an argument is an act of imagination, not just picking sides. What we want to do is to establish some metaphors for argument, and then we want to talk about some traditional structures that will help you get beyond talking over each other or contradicting each other. First of all, some people think of argument as a kind of conversation, an ongoing conversation that you enter, one that's already in progress. You listen for a while, try to understand the terms and the stakes, and then you enter the conversation. And of course, the conversation continues long after you leave. There's a longer discussion of this metaphor in Kenneth Burke's essay, The Philosophy of Literary Form. Another way to think of argument is, as Ballinger says, an act of imagination. Think about the fact that there are many people participating in an argument, and you can and should try to examine an argument from a variety of perspectives, much the same way that you might try to enter the mindset of characters in fiction. This means that you would bow to the complexity of the subject rather than thinking that you understand it all and you just want to keep pressing your own understanding of the case, even though other people may see it quite differently. Another way to think about an argument is that it's like a story. That is, that you're telling the story of how you came to believe what you believe, and you're helping people to understand it, your point of view as well. In a sense, it's the flip side of the act of imagination where you're trying to imagine what other people are thinking. In the metaphor of argument as a story, you're trying to get other people to understand how and why you think as you do. There are some traditional structures for arguments, and we're going to examine a few of them rather quickly. The first is the classic argument, and the other two, in a sense, elaborate on this structure. The first step in this structure is the thesis, which includes your claim, an arguable statement, and then the reasons for your claim. Your proof is basically the evidence and the subclaims that you need to prove that your reasons actually demonstrate your claim. Traditional arguments typically refute, that is, they examine counter-arguments in order to show that they are either inadequate or incorrect. And after the refutation, the writer usually summarizes and resumes the case that she has tried to make to begin with. An elaboration of the classic argument is the Toulminian argument. It is also a claim and support type of argument. After making the claim, you then offer the foundations for making your claim, your facts, your grounds, and your reasons. The warrant establishes that there is, in fact, a connection between your reasons and the claim. You rebut counterclaims as you do in the classic argument, and you also offer qualifiers or hedges, that is, you show where there are limits to your claim, in order to strengthen the overall thrust of your claim. Yet another form of argument is the Rogerian form. In this kind of argument, you're trying to examine where there may be common ground. You state the problem, you summarize various points of view, and you try to establish where there may be valid shared territory where people may share some assumptions. In some ways, the Rogerian argument is trying to reach consensus through synthesizing various points of view. Finally, we just want to point out that we also talked about another argumentative strategy earlier when we talked about using sources in the idea of countering, which came from Joe Williams. If you haven't looked at that video about using sources, you might want to look at it, or if you have, take another look for more information about countering, which is the process of looking at other views and texts not as wrong but as partial, in the sense of being interested in a point of view but also incomplete. When you counter, you bring a different set of interests to bear, your own, on the subject, and you look to notice what others have not. We hope these metaphors and structures will help you as you think about constructing your own arguments.